Hello and welcome to 12 Minute Mark. Here we are now beginning in chapter 12. Jesus is taking arguments and questions from all fronts as he's attempting to teach. And now here he starts with a parable. And so we'll get right into it. There's three sections here we want to cover. I said, he began to speak to them in parables. He said, a man planted a vineyard. And he put a wall around it, dug a pit for the winepress, and built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard out to tenants and went away on a journey. Well, at harvest time, he sent a servant to go collect some of the fruit of the vineyard. But they seized him and beat him, treated him shamefully, and sent him away empty-handed. And so he sent another servant to them. They struck this man on the head, treated him shamefully. He sent another. That one they killed. He sent others. Some they beat, and others they killed. He had one left to send, a son whom he loved. He sent him last of all, saying, "They will respect my son." But when the tenants said to one another, "Come, this is the heir. Let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." So they took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will kill those tenants and give it to others. Haven't you read this scripture? The stone the builders rejected has become the capstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our sight. Then they looked for a way to arrest him, because they knew he had spoken the parable against them. But they were afraid of the crowd. So they went away. Later, they sent some Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. They came to him and said, "Teacher, we know you're a man of honor and integrity. You're not swayed by men because you don't care who they are. You teach in accordance with the truth. Is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we?" But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. "Why are you trying to trap me?" He said, "Bring me a denarius. Let me look at it." And so they gave him the coin. And he asked them, "Whose portrait is this and whose inscription?" "Well, Caesar's," they said. "Give to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God's what is God's." And they were amazed by him. Then the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him with a question. "Teacher," they said, "Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves no child, the man must marry the widow and have children for his brother." Now there were 7 brothers, and the first one married and died without leaving any children. So then the second brother married and again died without leaving any children. And in fact, all of them, 7 of them, married her and left no children. At the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since all 7 were married to her? And Jesus said, "You are in error in that you do not know the Scriptures nor the power of God. When the dead rise, they will neither be married nor given in marriage, but they will be like the angels in heaven." Now about the dead rising, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the story about the bush, how God said to them, "I am the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. He is the God of the living, not of the dead. You are badly mistaken." So there's 3 great episodes, Jesus battling it out with the opponents who are coming at him. But first he gives out his own teaching in this parable. Parable is almost requoted, a parable that we'll find in the book of Isaiah, where it is spoken almost exactly the same way, except it's about Israel itself being corrupt, and here it's the religious leaders being corrupt. Now, usually in a parable, there's something that kind of stands out as something that's really shocking. And for us here, what's shocking is that the owner who has had all of his servants beat or killed or thrown out, which, by the way, those represent the prophets, and the one who was killed, perhaps John the Baptist even, that he would send his son. You think, wow, that's crazy. Why would you send your son? That's that shocking point of the parable. that God would really send his own son to suffer and die, and that he should be received, he should be loved. After all, he is the heir of the vineyard. It belongs to his Father. Everything belongs to his Father. And of course, this is the great prediction of the crucifixion that's coming. And they get it. They know exactly what he's talking about. Let's kill him and the inheritance will be ours, which is crazy. It's you just think about it and it's like, wow, when Jesus tells this story, it just unveils. It cuts through all the tit for tat and all the politics and all the jealousy and all the fear of the crowd and all this stuff. When you take a look back and say, wow, this is really crazy that they would, if they really knew that this is the Father's vineyard and this is the Father's Son, that how they would really treat him. And so it is just like the death of the fig tree, and the last one was this enacted miracle parable to show death. So, and that you should find fruit. Here it is. Here's the parable. The owner is going to his people to get some of the fruit. It's his vineyard. Our work is to bear the fruit. He's created, he's planted, he's done all the seeding, he's built the wine press, he's built the watchtower, he's done all the work, and you're there to build and bear fruit. And the Father shows up to bear fruit, and of course there's no fruit. And so it's really a more detailed picture of the crucifixion, of his own death, the way the cursing of the fig tree was the message of the death of the spiritual part of the nation of Israel. And then we go to this next one. Of course, he's trying to be tripped up. And so we see something a little bit different here. Again, they're always trying different angles to get him, and they try flattery this time. They haven't really tried flattery. We know that you're not scared of anyone. You don't care who people are. You're no respecter of persons. So Jesus sees through that. And again, only Jesus could come up with such a lesson. He takes the denarius, and it helps to know that this really isn't a story about taxes so much as it is about allegiance. And so on the denarius, on the Roman coin, you have the stamp of Caesar, and under Caesar it says, a God. He claims himself to be God in the language on the coin, and then he does a little play on words, and he says, whose picture and inscription is this? And the picture, of course, is Caesar. The inscription is, the Most High God of Caesar, believing himself to be God. And he said, well, this is something that has Caesar's picture on it. It belongs to him. But you give to God what is God's. And I believe he's speaking there of themselves, that this coin is created in Caesar's image. Here's Caesar's image. You are created in God's image. It's the same word, being created in the image of God. And so you've been created in God's image. You give yourselves to God. You can give Caesar back his coin. It's got his name on it. It's got his picture on it. And so he bypasses what is a very controversial subject about taxes at that time, and points it into the radical cost of discipleship, as he's been doing all along. That you are created in the image of God. That's really what that passage is about, and that you belong to him. You give yourself over to radical discipleship, and you bear fruit. Don't worry about the coins. So it's not really a parable about money at all. And of course, they're amazed. They're continuing to be amazed from chapter 1 till now. They continue to be amazed, but that amazement typically doesn't turn over into faith. They're there for the show. They're not there to become disciples. And then we have, next round of opponents come, the Sadducees, they were a group that did not believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in the Old Testament except for the first 5 books of Moses. And so they didn't believe anything about the resurrection. So they come with a riddle, basically. Now they're going to try to trip him up. And they tell this, cute little story about a woman who outlives 7 husbands, and then says, well, okay, now at the resurrection, they don't believe in a resurrection. Whose wife will she be? And so Jesus points out, interestingly enough, that a verse we typically might not go to talk about the resurrection, Jesus goes to. And Jesus doesn't say, well, in Isaiah or Jeremiah, because they don't believe Jeremiah or Isaiah. They don't hold to the prophets. They only hold to the books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers. And so they don't believe the resurrection. So Jesus goes to their own source of authority in Exodus, and at the that the burning bush is a story not just about Moses going and freeing the people of Egypt, but it's a statement that God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, even though they were long gone even at the time of Moses, that he is not the God of the dead, but he is the God of the living, meaning there is no state of perpetual death that people enter into. And just really points out how mistaken they are, that in marriage. And it's also interesting that we will not be married. People have asked that question, will you be married in heaven? And the idea is whatever state that we happen to be in, it will supersede the marriage relationship. He's already spoken extremely high of marriage, and that to divorce and remarry is adultery. So in his words, and so he's spoken very highly of that. But again, at the end of time, in the eternal state, however we relate to each other will be beyond what marriage is. We will not become angels. That's been a typical thing, that you die and you become an angel. It's just that you will be like an angel, and that the angels are not married. But we will have resurrection bodies. It remains to see exactly what all that will be. But he's taking on the opponents coming from all sides, and every time someone opens their mouth, he shuts them down. People are amazed, and will continue to be amazed here as now he gives, in our next episode, finishing chapter 12, the greatest commandment and the widow's mite. And so we'll see you again soon for our next episode of 12 Minute Mark.